Welcome to the Air Raid Hour, a Cover One Network podcast. Here are your hosts, Judge Mathis and Tilt Money.
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Air Raid Hour. Apologies for the late start this evening. I, as a father of a newborn, was struggling a little bit. This is the first time I've been late to something since fatherhood has began. So I assume it won't be the last time. So apologies for the late start here this evening. But Dave, it is that time of year. I'm just going to play this beautiful sound for you. 3 days away from the 2023 NFL draft. The best chimes, the best noise in all of sports right there. Our Christmas. We are knocking on the door, and we're going to do our favorite show tonight, our No Matter What show, where we talk about our favorite prospects. And we have you guys in the comment section share your favorite prospects. And you guys know us, we're draft guys. We can't just pick one player. So we got to do one player from each position, because that's how much we love the NFL draft in this process. But before we start, Dave, any sort of like bold predictions for Thursday night, whether it's Bills related or just NFL related? I know all of the craziness and the rumors are flying around. What are you buying in on right now in terms of some of the predictions for Thursday night?
It's hard to like always remember back week every year and know that it's like total smokescreen week every year. So you hear these rumors flying around, like, and a lot of these rumors coming from like very credible people, and Zerline among others.
Mm-hmm.
And what I think it tells me is that I think this first round, maybe more so than the last couple of years, is going to be even more unpredictable than first round than we've seen maybe in the last couple of years. I mean, last year we were pretty good on, like, we had like the first 6 picks guessed correctly to a T. Like, we don't even know right now technically who the number 1 pick's even going to be, right? Like, let alone 2, 3, 4 and down the line. So I'm really excited about that. And I think that's why the rumor mill is really flying. And the smoke screens are going up, and there's just lots of chatter. And this is a very, going to be a very unpredictable first round. And I think a lot of that also has to do with like the top end talent is shallower. I think in the first round this year, there's still like a lot of good players, but you know, it makes for a very interesting dynamic. Like, will you see more teams trying to trade up maybe than you did in prior years? Will you see more teams trying to trade out if they're not in the top 15 because they feel like there's such a drop off? So I think it's going to be a lot of fun, because I think that all these mock drafts finally will get our answers on Thursday. And I'm looking forward to the chaos. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about sort of like scanning, and it's like, what do you believe? What don't you believe? I certainly do not believe the report that came out today from Peter Schrager that 3 tight ends are going to go in the first round and 2 running backs are going to go in the first round. If you have 5 players in totality between tight end and running back going in the first round, to me, that would be absolutely wild. I'm not buying that. Somebody else said more running backs will go in the first round than wide receivers. Again, not buying that. But 2 of the ones that I am sort of buying into are Philly and Buffalo, being 2 teams that are going to look to make a move in the draft. Philly, defending Super Bowl runner-ups. They lost a lot of players in free agency. Maybe they're looking to take a swing at a marquee name. They sit there at 10 in the draft, and they have a chance to move up from 10 and grab a marquee player, whether it be a Jalen Carter, who played with, Jordan Davis, and he played with Nakobe Dean. Maybe those 2 guys can sort of harness him and channel him and keep him in line. He's sort of an alpha type of player that would be just ridiculously scary. Or maybe they're trying to jump Atlanta for Bijan, because, the Philadelphia would like a player like Bijan as well. So to me, Philly trading up, I think, is a distinct possibility. And I know Brandon Beane said betting money in Vegas, like, bet that we're going to trade back. I'm buying the smoke that Buffalo is going to make a move. I don't think it's going to be for DeAndre Hopkins. My prediction for the first round is that the Buffalo Bills trade up for a wide receiver in this draft, whether it be Smith and Jigba, Jordan Addison, or Zay Flowers. all three guys in which they've met with. I think the Buffalo Bills are trading up for one of those three guys. That's my bold prediction, Bills related for the first round. Who have you sort of honed in? Maybe like maybe you're going to wait till Thursday to reveal it, but who are you leaning towards as your prediction for the Buffalo Bills first round pick?
The smoke would tell you that wide receivers should be in strong consideration, right? All of these top 30 visits with those guys you mentioned, Njigba, Flowers, Addison, all visited with the Bills officially. We know that the Bills were sniffing around DeAndre Hopkins as far as the trade rumors. It was, they were one of the teams reported in on him. So there is enough smoke around the Bills being interested in a wide receiver to me that they would consider taking a wide receiver in the first round. It would be interesting based on their board, whether that means that maybe they trade up or trade down or stay put. But if they really love one of those top three guys you mentioned, they might have to. And I keep coming back to the Giants who pick at 25, that I don't think Brandon Beane wants his buddy Joe Shane to pick a guy like a Zay Flowers or a Jordan Addison ahead of him at pick 27 if he had his way with it. We know those guys are good friends, but also Beane doesn't want him to get the best of him there. So I could see I believe it's the Jaguars and the Vikings are the two teams picking ahead of the Giants 23 and 24, that maybe those are two teams the Bills could eye a potential trade up for, where it's only a few spots and maybe you only have to give up like a fourth rounder to move up to that and really land that guy like an Addison or Flowers if they're still there. That would be quite interesting. Very similar to kind of what they did last year when they traded up for Kaiir Elam.
All right, we're going to get right into tonight. We're going to unveil our no matter what list for each position in this year's NFL draft. But before we do, this show is brought to you by Picasso's Pizza. 4 great locations: Williamsville, West Seneca, Lancaster, and Blaisdell. Buffalo Pizza since 1980. You can order online at picassospizza.net. And if you're an out-of-towner like us, you can even get it mailed to your home. And I can tell you, and Dave can tell you from experience, it's just as good as getting it fresh from the restaurant. Again, that is picassospizza.net. So make sure you get your pizzas ordered and ready so you can just sit back, relax on draft night, tune into the Cover One Sports Network, because we'll be the ones hosting night 1 here at Cover One. You'll have Disguise coverage hosting night 2. You'll have the Going Deep pod. They'll be hosting day 3 of the NFL draft. So Cover One's going to have you covered from start to finish this week for the NFL draft. But Dave, you excited? I know we're hosting night 1. You excited about that?
I am excited about night 1. You know what I've been like? It's funny. We're doing this show tonight. Obviously, it's going to be kind of Bills centric, but the next couple days, I'm really going to be studying the depth charts of all the teams really, and kind of really making sure that we don't know these other teams' rosters as in and out as we do the rest of the NFL, but got to have a good cursory knowledge of the depth charts of some of these teams, know where they might be headed. Obviously, we have a pretty good idea of the divisional teams with us in the AFC East, but I think it's fun because, the Bills pick late and we get to talk about really every team in the NFL along the way. So I am very excited about it.
All right, let's get things started this evening. At first we weren't going to do it, but then I sort of talked you into it. We're going to, even though the Buffalo Bills don't need a quarterback, we're going to do it no matter what this year with quarterback. So we're going to start our first no matter what with the quarterback position. And we've even got the beautiful music to go along with it. So here's our first no matter what draft prospect of this year's draft. At quarterback, we have the two of us have decided sort of a consensus that our no matter what pick at quarterback this year is Jake Haener. Now we went and we tried to look for people because me and you are each going to have our own no matter what. This is our consensus no matter what. We tried to go out and for quarterback, we tried to not do the early round guys. We tried to look for guys that maybe could fall to a position where the Buffalo Bills could draft them and they could come in and they could make an impact on the football team. And the reason why we came to a consensus for Jake Haener is because despite the fact that he's maybe more of a smaller prospect with some injury history because of his diminutive stature, he's got really good instincts. He's got really good accuracy. He's got really good touch. He knows how to lead receivers. He's just a tough dude who's played through injuries. He's a team leader. He's gutted through some big games in the pack, playing against Pac-12 opponents out here in the West Coast at Fresno State. High football IQ. He's never going to be a regular starter in the NFL, but he's sort of in that Tyler Heineke mold. He's the perfect type of backup quarterback / spot starter. If he, for some reason, is one of the quarterbacks who slips into this draft into the 5th, 6th round, he's definitely someone the Buffalo Bills should consider pulling the trigger on.
Yeah, and look, he's a guy that has made the most of his physical, of his physical attributes. He's not the most physically gifted guy, but he realizes his own limitations. And I think that to akin like a Case Keenum, if you will, or even a Matt Barkley, right? When he first came out, like obviously there are physical limitations there, but Chase Daniels, another guy that comes to mind. These are guys that have played a long time in the NFL as backups. And that's a chance for Jake Haener, right? In this situation is like, he's a smart dude. He knows football. He has been through a lot, as you mentioned. He's got the most out of what was on the table for him and the hand that he was dealt. So having a guy like that in your locker room, to me, I think would fit well. And I'd be kind of open to that if the Bills decided they would want to. Yeah, and that's a good one right there. Look, and we're not saying like we're going to go through all these positions. Like obviously the Bills only have 6 picks, right? So it's like they're not going to be picking all these positions. But we're saying
if Brandon Beane trades back, like he says he maybe kind of wants to, maybe we have enough picks.
Yeah. So like we're not sitting here saying the Bills should draft this guy, but we're just saying like
we like
the position this guy that we like. Yes.
Yeah, Chris Jenke comes in with a great comment. He says Josh Allen having a Fresno State quarterback to carry his bags and bring him coffee every morning would be poetic justice. Yeah, that's right. Josh Allen grew up in the Fresno State area. He went to quarterback camps with people like Derek Carr. He was turned down by Fresno State. He had to go that JUCO route before ending up at Wyoming. So yeah, that would be sort of some poetic justice there. Maybe Josh Allen tells Brandon Beane and co to keep Jake Haener off the draft board for that reason. But I sort of wanted to jump right in because I'm so excited for the show that I sort of failed to explain how we're operating this evening. So me and you have gone through, and at each position we've created a consensus no matter what. A guy that we both agree is a no matter what prospect for us. But then since we love prospects so much, we want to hit on at least 3 guys at each position. Me and you each have our own individual no matter what's on top of our consensus no matter what. So we have an air raid hour no matter what, and then we have each of our own, a tilt money no matter what, and a Judge Mathis no matter what. So who is your tilt money no matter what, sort of as a back of the draft type of quarterback if the Bills do decide to maybe take a chance on a backup quarterback late?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's a guy I've mentioned in the past, Clayton Tune. Like, I think that, look, again, we've seen guys come out of Houston and kind of have decent careers. Case Keenum, again, another guy that comes to mind. Clayton Tune's a guy I think at the very tail end of the draft is someone that you could look at and say, hey, this guy was a 4-year starter. He was a team captain. He's also overcome adversity. He's pretty decent at working through his progressions. He's pretty good at climbing up into the pocket and keeping his eyes downfield. Decent enough arm strength, not the best, but pretty good. And stature-wise, like size-wise, right? He's one of probably the bigger prospects at quarterback in this draft at 6'2", 6'3", 220. So obviously he's got some downsides to his game. If he didn't, he'd probably be talked about as an earlier round guy, but he's not the best under pressure, which we know is not going to be great for him coming in right away. Doesn't have the quickest release. And he's not the best thrower on the move, but from a physical specimen standpoint, I kind of like Clayton Tune and I kind of like his demeanor. So for me, he's a guy that I could be happy with bringing into the room, as a later round guy, EFA type. But again, I'll just end my spiel here saying like, I'm advocating for the Bills to not draft a quarterback in this draft. So I'll just say that.
And I read a great article in The Athletic this morning too about how the quarterback pool is shallower this year, at least in the back end, because of NIL and because of the transfer portal. So guys can now transfer to bigger programs. Guys can go and make almost $1 million, $2 million in some places, or hundreds of thousands of dollars. So guys like Bo Nix, guys like Sam Hartman, some of these guys like Jaden Daniels, instead of declaring for the NFL draft, they're going back to college for an extra year. They're transferring to a different school. So the quarterback pool kind of shallowed this year. So you're correct in that the Bills maybe should pass on a backup quarterback late, because Jake Hayner's probably going to go way earlier than we like. The guy I'm going to talk about is probably going to go way earlier than we would like to take a quarterback. Ron Beck comes in and says, I like O'Connell from Purdue. I like O'Connell as well. JUCO Jared Goff. But Chris Jenke says, if I'm a betting man, I'm betting for Judge taking DTR. And that's where I am going with my pick. I'm going for Dorian Thompson-Robinson out of UCLA. I've liked him for 2 years now as like a 5th, 6th, 7th round pick, a guy you draft. He gives you sort of those Tyler Huntley vibes. He's athletic. He's got a strong arm, 5-year starter, plenty of reps, high football character. But at the end of the day, now I'm starting to hear like Dorian Thompson-Robinson, the 4th rounder. And I'm like, nah, too rich for my blood. Even 5th round would be like too rich for my blood, because this quarterback class is so shallow. We're going to be swimming in like the Stetson Bennett waters once we get to the 6th and the 7th round. And I really just have no interest in that. So DTR is my no matter what at quarterback. And we're going to move on from quarterback because we probably spent a little more time there than we should have, because the Buffalo Bills have Josh Allen. But up next is running back. And our air raid hour consensus, no matter what running back is, the running back from Texas, 6 foot, 220 pounds. He's got a really good blend of size, power, vision, patience. He's not afraid, and you can see it in a lot of his tape. He's not afraid to run people over. Many people believe, being Bijan's backup, if he would have transferred elsewhere, he would have been sort of a higher or more touted prospect coming out than he is. And he already is an insanely highly touted prospect, a guy who went from like a cool pick in the 6th, 7th round to a guy I think is going to go in the 2nd or the 3rd round on day 2 of this draft. Sort of a blessing that he was Bijan's backup at Texas. The lack of work at Texas equals more tread on his tires in the NFL. He's got like an RB1 prototype. So Roschon Johnson is our consensus, no matter what running back in this year's draft class. Dave, speak on Roschon a little bit.
I'm a big fan of Roschon. You kind of see him having a little bit of a meteoric rise during this sort of lead up to the draft. I think that he is going to be appealing to a lot of teams. And I think what's great about Roschon is that he's a fit in almost for almost any team. He is not a specialized back. He can do it all. And as you mentioned, not having the tread on the tires, being Bijan's backup, we've seen guys at the likes of Georgia and Alabama kind of have this just continuous bench of guys that they come and run through at the running back position. Now at Texas, you see that happening this year with Bijan and Roschon. And I think that, it's a bit eye-opening because people have rightfully been talking about Bijan a ton, but now I think the talk is rightfully kind of shifting towards, hey, Roschon Johnson himself is no slouch. And I think you look at a guy like James Cook last year, who was not necessarily the primary ball carrier for a Georgia team, ends up going in the 2nd round, where before the draft, probably no more than a month leading up to the draft, like some people probably thought he was a early day 3 type pick. It's not that dissimilar from Roschon this year with his rise up lately. And I would be more surprised if he's still sitting there on day 3 than not. So I'm a big Roschon fan. You don't have to make the huge investment like you would into a Bijan in round 1, and you still get a guy that's capable of being an RB1 in the future. So sign me up for some Roschon Johnson.
Because it's great to have a number 1 running back, and if we have a chance to draft Bijan Robinson, and we do, I'm all for it. And I know you're all for it as well. But at the end of the day, we also have James Cook here in Buffalo. So to me, we're looking for guys to complement. We're looking for like a stable of backs. The Buffalo Bills have yet to really show that they're going to really just lean on one guy. We saw last year we got mad that like James Cook wasn't getting enough touches, and him and Devin Singletary were like splitting it 50-50. So imagine if like a Bijan Robinson came in, like we'd be taking the ball out of Josh Allen's hands at that point. And that's not something that anybody wants. So a guy like Roschon, especially I'm willing to go as high as the 4th round for Roshan because he's our guy this year. I really like his game. Like, I think he would be an upgrade over Damian Harris. You could easily just axe Damian Harris after you signed a guy or you drafted a guy, like Roshan Johnson. But yeah, he's a fun one. A couple people in the comment section have mentioned Sean Tucker. He had like a heart issue, was not cleared to work out at the combine. The Syracuse running back, a guy we talked about a couple of days ago on our day 3 gems. I don't know if Sean Tucker's going to get drafted. Like, between the heart issue, even though he was cleared, he didn't run his 40 today, even though he looked good. He was still not conditioned enough to run a 40. I got some bad feelings around Sean Tucker and his draft status, but if the Buffalo Bills or someone else takes a swing at Sean Tucker, we talked about him a couple of shows ago in the 6th or the 7th round, I think they would get a really good return on that investment. But I'm not feeling too great about Sean Tucker's draft stock just because of sort of the medicals surrounding him. And that's just really unfortunate for a kid who had a great career at Syracuse. But continuing on with running backs here, Dave, who is your personal, no matter what?
And I'll just say this too about the running back position. It seems like it's the first time in a couple years where running back talk to the Bills hasn't dominated a lot of the early or a lot of the chatter around the Bills draft pick. Like, most people feel like Bijan's not going to be there at 27. So that kind of just automatically takes running back out of the conversation for the first round, which is fine for a lot of people. In years past, that wasn't necessarily the case. So I'm not necessarily advocating that the Bills draft a running back in this draft, just like quarterback. But in the right spot, I could get behind it. My no matter what running back this year is a guy that's tugging on my heartstrings a little bit from just down the road from me. My brother-in-law is an ECU Pirate alum. Got a chance to talk to him a bit about this player and went back and watched some of these games. Keaton Mitchell for the ECU Pirates is just a home run threat waiting to happen. He's not the biggest dude, obviously, in the world. He's only like 5'8", 180. Kind of reminds you maybe a little bit of like a CJ Spiller type, but this guy had 2,900 scrimmage yards and 24 touchdowns over the last 2 seasons, led the FBS with 54 runs of 10 plus yards in 1 season last year. He's got the speed. He's got the acceleration. He can contribute a little bit on special teams. He did some kick returning. Look, the Bills signed Damian Harris to kind of be that complement to James Cook. They have Nyheim Hines in the stable to be that RB3 type guy and that special teamer. But if the Bills were looking to add a guy, just talented guy who's got speed and brings some elements to the room that can be of value, I like Keaton Mitchell. I think he brings a lot to the table, and I think that you could do worse than him in the later rounds or even as EVA. And obviously, a little bit of a close to home pick for me there from ECU, only about an hour and a half away from where I am.
I got a couple people here coming in here. Eric K comes in, says Tajay Spears. It was tough to leave Tajay off of my list. I didn't use Tajay, but he was close. Big fan of Tajay Spears. A couple of people have come in and they have said Zach Charbonnet. Zach Charbonnet is probably the RB3 in this draft behind Bijan and Gibbs. Lot of love for Charbonnet. I love watching him on the West Coast this year. Haven't really hyped him up too much just because, again, the Buffalo Bills, really, I don't want them to take a running back that early. And then Chris Jenke, another one of my, again, I love everybody, and everyone knows at this point that I love everybody. But I really am a big fan of Muhammad Ibrahim, and I think his medicals probably will make him a UDFA out of Minnesota. And I think he's a guy who could be like an RB3 for a team and get some of those tough between the tackle carries for a team. Really big fan of Mo Ibrahim out of Minnesota there. But the running back that I'm going to go with is Evan Hull out of Northwestern. 9.32 RAS score at 5'10", 209 pounds. Really good speed, 4.47 40. And just like, honestly, elite explosion grades. This is a guy who squats 515 pounds. Yet he's still super nimble. He's got plus contact balance. He forced 50 missed tackles in 2020. And this dude's got legitimate receiving chops. He ran out of the slot at times in Northwestern. He was even flanked out on the boundary at Northwestern. 55 catches last year for 546 yards. That was a 9.9 yard average. he reminds me of sort of those old school New England running backs. He looks like a more explosive Rex Burkhead out there. He's never going to be a lead back, but I think he will be a fun piece in the rotation. And I think he would be a good complement to a running back like James Cook and to a running back like Nyheim Hines. So yeah, I'm really a big fan of Evan Hull out of Northwestern. So he would be my no matter what running
I
back
like Evan
this
Hull
year.
too. It's a good pick.
And that leads us now to wide receiver. And our pick this year, the Air Raid Hour consensus pick for the no matter what wide receiver is the wide receiver out of Ohio State. 6'1", 196 pounds, just absolutely elite agility testing numbers, like off the charts good. People want to hone in on his 4.48 40, which some people claim at his pro day was manufactured or exaggerated, or he waited till his pro day to run to make it look better. Some people want to say he's a slot only guy. He's not a boundary guy, but you just look at those agility numbers and it's Julian Edelman-esque. And that's not a knock. Even if he's a slot only player, he is a first round draft pick. And we've discussed this in the past on this show in this class because he's going to give you number one wide receiver production, but he's just going to do it from an atypical position out of that slot, much like Cooper Kupp, much like Amon-Ra St. Brown. To top all that off, wide receivers coach Brian Hartline says he's the best wide receiver he's ever coached there. Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson sing his praises, call him the best wide receiver that of that group that they had there at Ohio State a couple of years ago. And we always talk about on this show, Dave, big time players make big time plays in big time games. And in the 2021 Rose Bowl against Utah, Jackson Smith-Njigba had 15 catches for 307 yards and 3 touchdowns. He had a huge game. Him and my boy Britton Covey blew it up in that game. So Jackson Smith-Njigba, talk about him a little bit.
Well, here's the thing, right? And Eric Turner has done a great job breaking this down for the Bills offense, focusing really in on what the Bills offense has been missing, right? And it's about adding premium talent, but it's also about adding premium talent where it matches up with what you need on offense. And Jackson Smith-Njigba pretty much surmises exactly what the Bills have been lacking on offense and what they tried to bring in when they brought back Cole Beasley last year. And I'm sure what they've envisioned with Khalil Shakir. But when you have a guy like Jackson Smith-Njigba there, you don't pass up on a talent like that when you can put Stephon Diggs on one side, Gabriel Davis on the other, and him in the slot to go along with Dawson Knox. Like, it just makes too much sense. And we know that, at least from our assessment and from what the film guys have assessed as well, based on sort of Josh's comments and what he likes in his receivers, is he wants guys that can separate in the short areas. And the agility you mentioned, like, you're not going to get a better guy than other than maybe a guy like Zay Flowers from a separation standpoint in this class. So to me, it's a no-brainer. It's a perfect fit, I think, for the Bills as well for what they need. And if he's floating around there in the mid-teens, getting close to pick 20, and he still hasn't been picked yet, that could be a very tempting proposition for the Bills. And I just think that you're right. Like, there were questions about Justin Jefferson coming out being a slot-only guy when he was at LSU. So, like, we need to kind of put that sort of notion to rest a bit. It's like what the team asks you to do. Like, there's no doubt in my mind that he could play on the outside if need be, but he wouldn't really need to in the Bills offense. And that's fine. He'd go into a spot where he's immediately comfortable in the slot and he can contribute day one. And so, yeah, there's a reason he's the consensus pick for us.
And the Bills do need someone who can work that middle of the football field and can be sort of that safety blanket for Josh Allen, much needed since the days where Cole Beasley was elite. Because Cole Beasley, obviously, he was here last year, but he wasn't what he used to be, and he had been on the decline the past couple of years. So the Buffalo Bills could utilize a slot weapon like that. Now, again, that was our Air Raid Hour consensus. Who is the tilt money no matter what wide receiver in this year's draft class?
I kind of cheated a bit on this. So I had two guys, but the number one guy I had was Josh Downs, and I put him as my no matter what because look, I think it's pretty evident that like I could get on board with Jackson Smith and Jigba, Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison, but if you're talking about like where I'd start feeling comfortable saying no matter what to a guy after the first round, I'd have a pretty hard time passing on a guy like Josh Downs in round 2 if that's where it ended up lining up. I mean, the guys at Cover One have done such a good job breaking down his film and his ability to separate and his route running prowess at UNC. And look, for the people who watch this show, like I'm an NC State guy. It's really hard for me to talk positively about UNC in any realm, but this is a guy that can just get open. He's racked up the catches and racked up the yards over the last couple seasons. And by the way, he has played on the outside too at Carolina. So he is not a one-trick pony in the slot if need be. Now, that's probably where he would end up in the Bills offense again, which is fine. It's a fit. And that route running ability that Josh Downs possesses, you're getting that elite route running ability potentially around later if you were to miss out on those top 3 guys. And so Josh Downs, slightly slender frame, like slight of frame, but if the Bills used him in the right way, I mean, this is a guy that can run any route in the book from the slot.
Mm-hmm.
And also, by the way, generate some yak while he's at it too.
Yeah.
So he is crafty and he can find really openings in the smallest of spaces. So Chris mentions his no matter what is Marvin Mims. That was my parentheses guy I had. I sent you my list and I kind of had him in parentheses. Yeah. So he would be kind of my honorable mention right here is Marvin Mims.
A lot of Emmanuel Sanders vibes to Marvin Mims' game. So you understand why the Buffalo Bills would be interested, even though he's not one of the receivers the Buffalo Bills have talked to, but neither has Josh Downs. And there was that Peter King article or something that came out today where Peter King was hinting at maybe the Buffalo Bills were being coy and trying to hide their interest in Josh Downs, and that he knows some people within the Bills. They're really high on Josh Downs, even though there was no top 30 visit. There was no smoke around Josh Downs. It was all just Bills fans liking Josh Downs' game as much as you do, making him your no matter what. Cedric Tillman came in. Someone said Jonathan Mingo earlier as well. I think Anti-Hubris comes in with a great question. He says, if the Bills were to reach on one player, who would you guys pick? It probably would be a wide receiver, right? Because we as Bills fans, we want our draft picks. I think most of Bills Mafia want to see our draft picks contributing early. There's seemingly a hole for the Buffalo Bills in slot receiver, and there's seemingly a hole for the Buffalo Bills at middle linebacker. So I think we all know Jack Campbell is the one that would fill that middle linebacker role, but Josh Downs at 27 could be intriguing. That's, I believe, who Peter King mocked to the Bills was Josh Downs at 27. And then this next guy that I'm going to talk about, a lot of people talk about him as a 3rd, 4th rounder. To me, I would put him in play as soon as 59. And that's my wide receiver no matter what. And that's Jaden Reed out of Michigan State University. 5'11", 187 pounds, ran a 4.45 40. He's got a body composition very, very similar to Stephon Diggs. Now, Stephon Diggs has morphed that since he's gotten into the National Football League, but at least combine-wise, Jaden Reed tested out very similar to Stephon Diggs. He was sort of hidden at Michigan State due to a lack of just solid quarterback play and kind of a weird offense there, a vanilla offense there at Michigan State. He's a true 3-level threat. He sells his routes. He's tough at the catch point. There are a number of people who seem to be in Jaden Reed's corner during this draft cycle that I trust. Jim Nagy of the Senior Bowl has been banging the table for Jaden Reed, who had an awesome Senior Bowl week and was just smoking people at the Senior Bowl, looking really good in those one-on-ones. Matt Harmon, who's making a living sort of just analyzing wide receivers for reception perception. Jaden Reed is one of his, sleeper guys this year. And then, friend of the podcast, one of the OGs, one of the guys that we came into this game with, Bruce Nolan, is also really high on Jaden Reed as well. So when that many people I trust are also very high on a guy, and I like a guy as well, that's going to be my no matter what sort of player. So I'm going with Jaden Reed as my no matter what wide receiver. And yeah, I do hope he's there at 91, but I would take him at 59.
It's a really good pick. And I think the question that was asked around like who would we reach for is a really interesting one, right? Because it's like there are two ways to approach the thinking, right? It's do you do you reach for a guy that you really need to fill a big vacancy, like a Tremaine Edmonds vacancy, and try to tip the scales back to even on with what you lost? Or do you really go for a position where you do have talent already and you try to just swing for the fence and just continue to add talent to a position group that's already talented, like wide receiver, right? Like, it's not like the Bills have made it to the Super Bowl or won the Super Bowl with what they did with Tremaine Edmonds. So is filling in and reaching for a guy at linebacker really going to put the Bills in a better position if that person's even 3/4 of what Tremaine Edmonds was? Or is it better for them to go the other way and try to add a wide receiver, which they hadn't really done early in drafts, and potentially see how that works out for them? There's many ways to think about this. So it's just like, it's a very fun debate to have.
On to the next position here, tight end. Our air raid hour consensus, no matter what, tight end this year is tight end out of Michigan, 6'5", 250 pounds, sort of rising up the draft boards as this offseason, this draft season has progressed. Combine numbers sort of in the mold athletically of Dawson Knox, the guy who's already here on the Buffalo Bills roster. But some of the reasons why you're going to want to buy into a guy like Luke Schoonmaker, he's a really good sort of inline blocker. He has got the size and the length to really vertically work the seam, something over the middle, something the Buffalo Bills might be interested in this offense. And he's just a highly competitive kid. Now, he is an older prospect. He hasn't really produced much there at Michigan. He's not really a yards after the catch threat, and he does need to get better sort of in these jump ball contested catch situations. But you look at a guy like Luke Schoonmaker, we weren't going to go and we weren't going to, beat the drums for the Michael Mayers and the Darnell Washingtons. I think both of us agree that like we really don't want the Buffalo Bills to pursue them. And even though I have like a love for Dalton Kincaid, I'm trying to marry like this experiment, this exercise with what the Buffalo Bills need at the same time. So I think both of us sort of honed in on the mid-tier tight ends. I get Cameron Brate vibes from Luke Schoonmaker. I think he is a perfect TE2 to Dawson Knox. You don't need to pepper him with targets. That's one of your favorite words there. He's not someone who's going to demand the ball. You can put him out there just to be a blocker, etc. You can get him in the 3rd, 4th round, and he can add another element, another layer to your offense without you being married to him and having to be in 12 personnel all the time.
Yeah, I mean, Thor Nystrom, who is a very big following on Twitter, big draft guy, writes for Fantasy Pros, Russ Brown's new colleague there. He put out his top 500 big board today, and he does a player comp for every guy on his big board. And he comped Luke Shoemaker to Dalton Schultz of the Dallas Cowboys, which I thought was quite an interesting comp as well. And I think Cameron Brate fits that mold as well. So I think that's a good comp for him. Obviously tested amazingly athletically with his RAS score, and we've seen some of the film work the guys have done. I think it's an exciting prospect. The question becomes is where's the sweet spot? I think like round 3 seems to be probably the sweet spot for him, but I think a lot of fans may think that's maybe too early to take a tight end. But you also have to remember, like, if they really love that guy and he did have a visit, it's hard because this tight end class is pretty deep, and I like a lot of the tight ends. So, but I do agree, like that would be a really solid no matter what pick there.
Silas with a couple of my favorites coming in saying Payne Durham or Bretton Strange. Then Eric K's got a prediction, Dave. He says Tilts is going to be Laporta. We already know it. So, Dave, who is your no matter what tight end in this class?
Yeah, it is Laporta. And look, my no matter what list probably runs the gamut of guys really from, call it like late round 2, early round 3, all the way to potential guys that are UDFAs, right? I really didn't want to have necessarily like all like round 7 guys or all round 3 guys. I kind of mixed it up a bit. So I did put Sam Laporta on there. I really, really like Laporta's game. Obviously tested well athletically, had like a 9.6 RAS, really good catcher of the football. He's an okay blocker. Like, you're not going to get like excellent blocking out of a guy like Sam Laporta, but if you're looking for a receiving threat as your TE2 with a little bit more size than a Quentin Morris, and you want to add to the room, Laporta is a guy that can fit that mold. The comp that Thor gave for Laporta was Owen Daniels, which I thought was a pretty good comp. Obviously, Owen Daniels, for all those years with the Texans, was kind of in that sort of second tier of tight ends. You remember for fantasy, he was like always kind of in that second tier, but an athletic guy, a little bit more slender, but willing to block, and really a pretty good catcher of the football. So Laporta to me would be the guy that, like, I probably wouldn't pick him in the second round because I just think it's too early. But if he was there slipping in the third round, I could see the Bills getting quite interested in the guy like that. But yeah, and as Charles says, Laporta is a nice round 2 guy for me. And that's where kind of like this was hard for me because there were other guys I liked, but not enough to where I liked them more than Laporta. So I put him as my no matter what.
Yeah, it's interesting. You said Owen Daniels. I've actually heard a couple of people say Evan Ingram because of that yards after the catch ability. So that was a super interesting comp. My ears sort of perked up when I heard that from a couple of people. Chris Janke says his no matter what is Zach Kuntz, but an honorable mention to my no matter what tight end, and that is Brenton Strange out of Penn State, 6'4", 253 pounds, just a solid receiver and a willing blocker, a guy you can get in the. Actually, he's kind of rising now. If he goes in like the 4th round, it wouldn't shock me, but you'd think you could get maybe in the 5th or the 6th round. Just sort of a perfect tight end to run 12 personnel with. Again, not a guy you have to marry your scheme to and be out. Like you draft Michael Mayer in the 1st round, you got to run 12 personnel more. You don't have to do that if you draft Brenton Strange in the 5th round. He can make plays with the ball, but he doesn't demand the ball. He averages 7 yards after the catch per reception. He is not fun to tackle. If you look at some of his film, he does not go down easy. He lowers his shoulder. He lowers his booms. He keeps his legs moving. Very big, very good yards after the catch guy, and just highlight reel after highlight reel blocks. I mean, he just gets after it in the run game. Very violent and strong hands. So a guy like Brenton Strange, to me, is just a perfect TE2 in the National Football League. I've seen him mocked a ton to the Miami Dolphins, and that scares me. I really do not need him going into that San Francisco style of offense there that Mike McDaniel runs, that Kyle Shanahan scheme. Really don't want to see him wind up in a place like that. All right, that leads us now to offensive tackle. Offensive tackle. And for offensive tackle, our Air Raid Hour consensus, no matter what pick is... Now, right, the offensive tackle out of Tennessee, 6'6", 335 pounds. We have talked about him a ton in this pre-draft cycle, and I mean, we have just been crushing and raving about him since he blew up the Senior Bowl. I said it during our Senior Bowl review show. This guy's going to be a late 1st round pick, and since then, he's probably moved himself up to some people's number 1 tackle in this draft class and to possibly a top 15 pick in this draft class. So Darnell Wright, there's a whole bunch of reasons to want to buy in with this kid. Just experience both at left tackle and right tackle. A lot of people think he could kick inside to guard and be a rather good guard. He's got really good hands, really good technique, really good length, just really good functional strength. And he's just really patient and good in pass protection. And that's what he's noted for. And when you have a team like the Buffalo Bills that just wants to throw the ball a ton, what do you want out of your right tackle? A guy who's known for his pass protection, a guy who shut down the likes of Will Anderson in the SEC. Now, Darnell Wright does not come without his warts, right? Like he needs work in the running game. He needs to add some like functional strength in the running game. He's not the perfect run blocker in the world, but I think if you're a team like the Bills, you live with that. There's some other warts I want to talk about, and we'll get to it. But first, what are your thoughts on Darnell Wright?
Look, Darnell Wright to me is plug and play. Plug and play day 1 right tackle. I think it's pretty evident that there have been struggles with Spencer Brown, especially considering the promise he had after his rookie season. Obviously, faced all those injuries throughout training camp last year and probably did hinder his development some, obviously also having the new O-line coach. But at the same time, we have to be realistic with what is most important, and that's protecting the franchise. And if Spencer Brown what leash, what long of a leash are you going to give Spencer Brown? Like, if you can get a blue chipper like Darnell Wright, like, as Bruce Nolan said, there's no guarantee that any one position is going to work out than any other, right? So it's like you take your chances at right tackle just as much as you are taking your chances at wide receiver. So you try to minimize the risk as much as possible. And to me, Darnell Wright seems like a very high floor caliber player, given that light and that switch turning on for him in 2022. So I'm all about it. Obviously, he's a freak as well athletically. So seems to really fit a need for the Bills. And it seems to be that if you're talking about value plus need, and if he falls to that pick at 27 or even a few picks before, it could line up really well for the Bills to make that pick.
And Darnell Wright too, just to speak on him a little bit more, he's the kind of guy with the athleticism and the upside where you draft him, he goes and he plays at right tackle for a couple of years. And then when Deion Dawkins' contract is up, you can shift him over to the left-hand side. That's why he's one of those players that we've talked about in previous shows. He might be worth a trade up into the teens. Go get him, because he not only is a plug-and-play right tackle, he could have a future for you as a franchise left tackle. So Darnell Wright, high on our boards. I know Bob McGinn, who now writes for Ty Dune and the Go Long sort of Substack that he has going on there, talked to a bunch of scouts who really dinged Darnell Wright's football character. They said he didn't really work that hard. He just relies on his natural talent, all of these different things. That's a concern. Now, Greg Tomsett did a great job in our Cover One group chat saying, like, there are guys in the league like Champ Bailey and Julius Peppers who are Hall of Famers, and they were not like gym rats. They were not like film warriors. They just showed up and they relied on their athletic talent, and they were Hall of Famers, and they were just fine. There are some guys who are like that, but I don't think it's a coincidence. And Aaron Quinn pointed that out in our Cover One group chat. It's not a coincidence that Darnell Wright was maybe the only offensive tackle to visit the Bills. The Bills probably wanted to get him into the facility to get to know this kid, to get to understand him, to get to know how he clicks, the things that we as fans don't see. And they wanted to really get to know him. And if the Buffalo Bills do decide to pull the trigger, that means that they really liked what they saw in that top 30 visit. Bills Are Electric says, we need this year's Deion Dawkins, someone in the second round that has upside, becoming a quality starter as an offensive tackle. Now, I'm not comping this player to Deion Dawkins, but I think the Deion Dawkins of this draft class, the second rounder or maybe late first rounder now, possibly, that could have some really good upside in this league. Matthew Bergeron out of Syracuse. He could be this year's Deion.
He certainly seems to have the same type of body type as Deion, and there was questions about what Deion was going to be at the next level, and it worked out for him. So Bergeron taking maybe a similar path, we will find out.
We got Chris Janke calling his shots on her no matter what, and he says that yours is going to be Wanya Morris. So Dave, who is your personal no matter what at offensive tackle?
I mean, I did kind of give this one away in the last show when I said you don't want you miss the next show for no matter what list. And it is Wanya Morris. And I think the reason it's Wanya Morris for me is because of the athletic ability, the 500 plus snaps he played exclusively essentially at right tackle in 2022, played a ton of snaps at left tackle back in 2020, but really kind of grew into his own playing right tackle last year for Oklahoma. Pass blocking grade really went up, only allowed 4 hurries on his 500 plus snaps at right tackle with Oklahoma, only allowed 2 sacks from that right tackle position. And I think the mold and the archetype fit to me seems to line up for what the Bills have typically sort of targeted at their tackle position. 6'5", 307. He's got that kind of like athletic build that the Bills have really looked for with their tackles, and a guy that has ascended, right? Has shown improvement throughout his collegiate career, was a transfer and ended up at Oklahoma. So Wanya Morris, very intriguing prospect to me, just under a 9 RAS. So, he's got the athletic ability as well. And, playing in a conference like that, where it's a lot of pass blocking snaps for offensive linemen on those Big 12 offenses is pretty good. So give me Wanya Morris for me, maybe as like a round 4, like early day 3 type of pick, as a no matter what, if the Bills haven't addressed tackle by then.
Chris, you're going to be 1 for 2 here, because his prediction for me was Nick Saldiveri, and I love Nick Saldiveri, but I like him more kicking inside to guard. So for as a true tackle, my personal no matter what this year in the class, and I've been really sort of drawn to like the older players in this class. I have a couple of guys who are like the older players in this class, like above 24 years old. And this one is no different. It's Carter Warren out of the University of Pittsburgh. He's an older prospect. He's got some injury concerns, some injury history. I know me and Silas we both got Carter Warren here. Team captain, 7-foot wingspan. He's got really good length at 6'5", 311 pounds, 35-inch arms. He's an NFL ready to me pass protector, and he's got really good hands. Now he does need to round out other aspects of his game, but I think at worst, Carter Warren is a really solid swing tackle. And one of the guys that I really wanted in free agency last year was Cornelius Lucas, a guy for the Washington Commanders who's maybe not like a premier starter in this league, but is a stopgap when somebody gets hurt, tie-in Secchi type. He can play left tackle. He can play right tackle. I love Cornelius Lucas. Lucas's fit just on an NFL roster as a backup. To me, that's who Carter Warren is, a Cornelius Lucas type. I think he could play left tackle, right tackle. I don't know if he's like the starter you're looking for, but I think he can be a really good swing tackle, and that's really, really valuable on an NFL roster. So my no matter what this year at offensive tackle is not Cornelius Lucas, Carter Warren. We had a couple of other people come in. Charles G said Blake Freeland for his no matter what. All right, on to offensive guard now. And our air raid hour consensus offensive guard, you all know who it is already, but the pick is in. The 6'5", 347 pound offensive lineman out of the University of Florida, transferred in from Louisiana, followed Billy Napier to Gainesville. This is a guy, just a big honking dude. Again, really good Senior Bowl. We couldn't stop raving about him during the Senior Bowl week. Run game, he is just dominant. He's just a really physical player, and he's got a solid anchor when he's pass protecting in that thick, sturdy frame. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Kendrick Green last year, a guy that we loved as sort of a late first-round pick. Now, he doesn't really fit the archetype the Buffalo Bills look for at 6'5", 347. Even though I think he slimmed down at the combine, he was 330. So I take it back. He's lost about 15 pounds down to 330. Still don't know if he quite fits the Bills archetype. He's about 15 pounds too heavy. That's again, the Buffalo Bills probably loved him as a player. That's why he's a top 30 visit, because he doesn't fit that archetype. So the Buffalo Bills maybe want to try to sell themselves. He is sort of a scheme specific player. But what are your thoughts on O'Cyrus Torrence?
I mean, at some point, you just have, if he's there, you take a great football player, right? And that's what he is. It's like archetype be damned in some situations, right? It's like maybe sometimes you have to look yourself in the mirror and say, we need to kind of allow our coaching staff to fit a guy like this into our scheme and put him in a position to play well, because just because he hasn't been the typical guy that they've drafted, he's by far and away the best player on the board. Like it would be pretty hard to pass him up at a situation where you really need to kind of, shore up that position for the long term. Like I know they got David Edwards in for this year, and Bates is there, and I know they signed McGovern, but like it's not gonna hurt anything having a guy like O'Cyrus Torrence in the room. Now, personally, like I don't think they're going to draft him. But I do think he's the best guard in the class, right? I mean, like unless you consider Skronsky a guard, but like I do think he's probably the best guard in the class.
100% in agreement there. Who is your personal no matter what at offensive guard?
Yeah,
centers in a moment.
Probably the least sort of sexy pick for me of the night. Like I actually don't really love a ton of guards in this class, to be honest. Like I'm not really blown away by a lot of them. In fact, I like guys more like Bergeron, who could like potentially slide into guard, guys like that a little bit more than the true guards. But I put Nick Broker as my no matter what guard. He doesn't have necessarily like the arm length and the hand size that maybe they would be looking for, but he does play heavy-handed, and he didn't allow a single sack per PFF last year in 435 pass blocking snaps. And the scouting report on him is that he treats opponents like a blocking sled once you've sent it up. That's Lance Zierlein's report on him. Really good with his angles, really good motor and finisher, good at good recoverer. And so like he's got all of some of like the technical things that you'd like to find in a guard from that standpoint. Obviously, he doesn't have the overall size and the strength like a Torrance has, but he's got a lot of nice sort of fundamentals, I would say, to work with for a guard prospect. So I like Nick Broker. I don't think he's anything more than like probably a mid to late day 3 type of guy, but I do like some of the fundamentals that he has. And I think he's also a guy that has played left tackle, by the way, in his career, started out at left tackle and got kicked inside to left guard. So one of those interesting guys that, is a guard, had played left tackle in the past, maybe not so great, but in a pinch could be like a Quessenberry type of guy for you on your team.
He sort of, he sort of reminds me of a guy that Cromer would fall in love with, a guy that we signed as a UDFA last year in Alec Anderson, sort of like similar body composition, body type to a guy like that. And Claude is right on mine. And that is my no matter what, my personal no matter what, is Chandler Zavala out of NC State. I actually have 2 NC State football players on my no matter what's, taking them from you, I guess. But 6'3", 322 pounds. I mean, strong, like just strong. He can latch on to guys. He can take them away. He's a people mover. He's not just a run blocker. He's a pretty good pass blocker as well. He can get out and he can move in space. Some people think he could even slide to center with a little bit of NFL development. And Brett Coleman made this comparison, and I just can't shake it. Brandon Brooks vibes, the Philadelphia Eagle interior offensive lineman. I think Chandler Zavala is that good. I was having a conversation with Jim Nagy. Jim Nagy was trying to tell me, like, you're too high on Chandler Zavala. He's going to be a day 3 guy. Like, there's a reason why he didn't get a Senior Bowl invite, a combine invite. It's the draft community that's fallen in love with him, but I can see why the draft community has fallen in love with him. Dane Brugler, Brandon Thorne, Brian Baldinger. Like, I'm just seeing left and right, just everybody. Mike Renner, everybody's fallen in love with Chandler Zavala in this pre-draft process. So I really do think that Zavala could wind up as a day 2 pick, and he's an interesting one. Again, another one that I don't know if it's maybe a Bills archetype fit, but he's going to be a fit for somebody, and I think he could plug and play right away.
I mean, the NC State's put some pretty solid interior offensive linemen out, in the past several years. We obviously had Garrett Bradbury, the center, come out a couple of years back with the Vikings. We had Joe Thuney, who's been a mainstay, obviously, for the Pats, like for years in the interior. Now you've got Chandler Zavala coming out. So, I mean, NC State was a very good running football team last year. Their offense was not great. With a lot of injuries. They didn't have a lot of skill position talent, but they could run the ball and they could move people off the line. So Zavala, I will be very interested to see where he ends up on draft day, if he ends up being a day 1, a day 2 type of guy, or if he does slide to day 3, because like you said, some differing opinions on him, obviously throughout the community.
For sure. All right. So again, we love draft prospects so much that we always talk about interior offensive line and we just mold centers and guards together. But for the purpose of this show, we separate them so we could give some more guys some love. And again, I think anyone who watches this show knows who our Air Raid Hour consensus center is going to be. The pick is in. No matter what, center is John Michael Schmitz out of the University of Minnesota, 6'3", 301 pounds. This guy is just an absolute sturdy build. He offers really a strong anchor in protection. He's fluid. He's athletic. He can get out in space. He's very effective with his hands. He's very effective at first contact. He's played a lot of games in college. To me, like, this is like the safest center you can draft. since probably Creed Humphrey. And because Creed Humphrey was so good with Kansas City, I think John Michael Schmitz will be drafted higher. You could maybe see him go late round 1, even though that buzz has sort of died down. Because again, for some reason, I don't understand, but for some reason, the position is not valued as much as others. It's not seen as a premier position. How the person who sort of anchors the line, how the person who snaps the ball to the quarterback, how that's not considered a premier position, especially when we see how offensive lines can collapse when a center plays poorly. I don't know, but for some reason it's not. But I think that John Michael Schmitz could get into that Garrett Bradbury range, Eric Wood range, and be a late first round pick. I'm really buying in on John Michael Schmitz. The Bills, again, probably not going to take him. They only did a Zoom call with him. It's not necessarily a need with Mitch Morse here, but if the Bills pulled the trigger on John Michael Schmitz at 27, I'm not losing an ounce of sleep over it.
Not losing an ounce of sleep. And could there be a little redemption story for not taking Creed Humphrey a couple years back? I know that still stings with a lot of Bills Mafia right now. Obviously, John Michael Schmitz was heavily sort of analyzed by our Cover One guys when they were down at the Senior Bowl. They, obviously did a lot of great work on him, fell in love with his play. And, part of it may be too that it's like his kind of highs came at the Senior Bowl, and we're now 2 months, pretty much 2+ months removed from that. So while his stock may not have taken a hit by any means, it's just maybe it's not the freshest topic right now. So it's just people kind of forget about how good he was at the Senior Bowl, but I will not lose any sleep over it as well. And I see a lot of people mentioning a name that's going to look pretty familiar here in a second. A couple names, actually.
Yeah. They've correctly predicted our 2 personal no matter what's already. Who is your no matter what, as it's already been mentioned a couple of times here in the comment section?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, this is one that's really no surprise. Probably for me, it's Ricky Stromberg. Put him on the graphic a couple weeks ago. Obviously, the 9.56 RAS tested really well there. He was PFF's 5th rated center overall in 2022, yet he's kind of being looked at as a day 3 prospect right now, which I think is incredible. He was on the Remington Trophy watch list. He's got a ton of experience. So he was right up there as far as being talked about as one of the best centers in college football. Now, he did struggle against some of the best competition that he faced, but that's kind of to be expected. And some of the scouting reports you'll read, Kyle Krabs from TDN kind of sees him more as like a power scheme type of fit. So I don't know exactly the fit for the Bills, but then you read some other you read some other things and you see, consistent timing, working up to linebackers, keeps his head on a swivel, athleticism to flip feet from Lance Zierlein. So there is something to work with there with Ricky Stromberg. So I like the fact that he's got good feet and he's got some good athleticism. And by most accounts, and I would say based on what I've read about him and some of the things that I've seen on him, is that he can be pretty much scheme agnostic, and the Bills could find a way to work him in 6'3", 306. He does seem to fit, at least archetype wise, the size and type of guy that they'd be looking for. So for me, I see him kind of as an early day 3 guy, but by most consensus, he's like a mid to late day 3 guy. So I'll give me some Ricky Stromberg.
My no matter what, and I'll tell you what, this is a guy who I don't understand how he's not a day 2 guy. I think he will be an early day 3 guy. And I think a lot of teams are going to be passing on a really good football player. He was already mentioned here earlier. He's a guard who's going to be transitioning to center, even though he's had some start to the center in college. And that's John Gaines out of the University of Central Los Angeles. 6'4", 303 pounds, almost 34-inch arms, 30+ college starts at right guard and center. Just an exceptional mover. And he's got strength on top of that to really bully defenders off the ball at the point of attack. His testing numbers at the combine, his 10-yard split, 173, 86th percentile. His 40-yard dash, 501, 89th percentile. And then here's where it just gets ridiculous. His short shuttle, 445, 97th percentile. His 3-cone, 731, 97th percentile. vertical 32.5, 90th percentile, and his broad jump of 114, 95th percentile. And that showed up at the Shrine Bowl where he was an absolute stud. And they do the zebra testing where they like sort of like, put the patches on the players and they sort of test their athletic ability. I mean, his explosion at the Shrine Bowl via the zebra testing was absolutely off the charts. This guy is just an explosive athlete. So John Gaines to me is my no matter what in the interior of the offensive line. And yeah, I did say the University of Central Los Angeles. I was just going to say UCLA. It just rolled off the tongue. I had no idea why I did it. So
University of Southern California. Central
I
Los
don't
Angeles.
I don't even know if it is the University of Central Los Angeles. I hope it is. That was just my guess as it rolled off my tongue. No idea why I did it.
Pretty sure it's University of California, Los Angeles. But
Ooh,
I could be wrong.
Okay. Well, I'm renaming it. I am renaming it. A couple people coming in with Olu from Michigan as well. He's a real sturdy guy in the middle, and he's a really good pivot. A lot of good centers this year. A lot of good centers. A lot of guys that people can plant their flag in this year. All right, on to edge rusher. This one might be a little bit of a surprise because we haven't talked too much about edge rushers over the course of this pre-draft process, but our pick is in for our no matter what edge rusher. The fifth out of Iowa State, 6'4", 240 pounds, almost 35-inch arms, just really a natural length. He's got such upside as a pass rusher, and he's just got a really high motor. This is a guy who at Iowa State was used as a 5-tech when he really should have been a traditional bendy type of edge rusher. And then he got to the Senior Bowl and he blew up the Senior Bowl, and he got to the combine and he tested really well. Now, one of the dings on him is he's one of the oldest prospects in this draft. He's probably off the Bills board at 27 due to that fact, but that doesn't make us here at the Air Raid Hour any less fans of Will McDonald out of Iowa State. Dave, your thoughts?
Yeah, you mentioned them using him at 5-tech, that 3-line front or 3-man front that they used at Iowa State. Very similar to another guy we really like, Felix Anudike-Uzomah, who has a similar skill set as McDonald, not quite the length, but again, they played him at 5-tech at Kansas State. I love Will McDonald. I think he's what the Bills could use in the room right now. They need someone who can really just naturally get to the passer. He's got the strength to push guys. He's got the outside edge pass rush moves. He's lengthy, but he's not slow, right? And he's not that sort of like bulkier type of edge that the Bills have really drafted, right? In guys like Epinesa and Basham, Rousseau being sort of the best of both worlds. But McDonald to me is the guy that you bring in if you feel like you need someone to fill in for Von Miller and give you the pass rush on the opposite side of Greg Rousseau. And as you mentioned, probably playing out of position at Iowa State a bit. I think putting Will McDonald as a pure edge in a 4-3 defense would be a great fit for him. And to me, that's a fit for the Bills personally. So I love Will McDonald.
I have done the research on Google. I looked up UCLA. It is the University of California, Los Angeles. Yes. So I'll take my L for that one. But I will say this: if you say anything confidently enough, it's not wrong. And I think I said it pretty confidently.
That's true. You were very confident.
One of your guys has been mentioned in the comment section already. Who is your pick for your no matter what edge rusher, your personal one in this draft?
I think for value and for just like this guy's gotten ahead of steam for me, and Pro Ant has done like a lot of good film on him lately, and I've kind of fell in love with him, and that's Isaiah McGuire from Missouri. Like I found it hard to find like mid-round edge guys that I really liked. I liked a lot of the later guys like O'Shawn Mathis, Tavius Robinson, guys like that, and I liked a lot of the early guys like Will McDonald and Felix Anudike, Nolan Smith, those types. But mid-round guys were a little bit tougher for me to find, and I landed on Isaiah McGuire, 9.53 RAS. He's inside the top 100 of PFF's overall prospects. He improved his grade quite dramatically from 21 to 2022, was an all-SEC player, second-team player in 2022, had made 23 straight starts to end his career there, finished the season with 13 TFL, 7.5 sacks. And again, he's just a guy that to me gives a lot of nice blend of power and athleticism from the position. And like, while there are some concerns, obviously, with some of his run defense and some of his fills, like from a pass rush standpoint and his first step off the ball, the dude is a monster, right? Like he's just a monster in clearing out space. So I really like Isaiah McGuire as kind of that middle round guy that gives you upside where you're not having to like take another project type guy late or investing early. He seems like a nice kind of a balance for me.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Isaiah McGuire. There's a ton of guys towards the middle of that draft who could be going in like the 3rd, 4th, 5th round. Thoroughly enjoy a ton of those guys. My personal, no matter what, is a guy who I think is fast rising as well. A guy who's going to get dinged again for his age. He's an older prospect, but that's Byron Young, the edge out of Tennessee, not the IDL out of Alabama.
Yes.
6'2", 250 pounds. Like I said, older prospect, 5th-year senior. Just really athletic. He's got good twitch and motor. He led the SEC in pressures per game in 2022 with 4.8 pressures. That's not something to dismiss. He's a Bruce Irvin type, Bruce Irvin-esque guy that you can add to your rotation, and you can get some pass rush pop out of him. So I'm not saying Byron Young maybe is a starter or like, but you know, as part of your rotation, I'm really digging like Byron Young, and he could end up like Ogbonya Onroku, a guy that we've liked in free agency a ton the past couple of years, just sort of that guy to come off the bench, be part of your rotation. I'm really a big fan of Byron Young out of Tennessee, and the Buffalo Bills did top 30 Byron Young as well. All right, so that leads us now to the interior of the defensive line. And again, if you watch this show, I think you know that we love the big fatties. You might be surprised by this one, but I don't think you'll be surprised by this one. Our pick is in for our no matter what consensus defensive tackle. University of Wisconsin, 6'4", 309 pounds. I mean, the thing that you just needed to know about this guy is just incredible raw power. He just gives you this outstanding run stuffing value. He's just so quick off the snap, and he can take on doubles. He's underrated from, I think, a pass rush perspective. He fits, I think, the archetype of the Buffalo Bills, because even though DeJuan Jones is listed at 6'4", 320, I think DeJuan Jones maybe played more like 6'4", 310, and that's right around where Keanu Benton is. To me, Keanu Benton is Daquan Jones reincarnated, and I think it's exactly what the Buffalo Bills should want. Whether that's what they do want, we will find out on Thursday, or maybe never if they don't take an IDL. But Keanu Benton's our dude. Talk a little bit about Keanu Benton.
Yeah, Keanu Benton's our dude. Steadily improved, from 2020, 21 to 22. 6 sacks last year from the interior. And you look at his, his snap breakout. Almost 200 snaps playing the A gap. So that's kind of like your 1 tech, your 2I type, depending on what shoulder he's lined up against. 230 snaps in the B gap. So that's kind of your 3 tech, 4I, depending on what shoulder he's lined up against. So he's got basically since 2021 and 2022, almost an even split of snaps playing the A gap and the B gap. So he is a guy that the Bills probably would be interested in, given that versatility of playing either position. We've seen the Bills do that with Tim Settle. We've seen them do that with Jordan Phillips. Now, I think they would probably prefer for him to probably be more of a direct backup to Daquan Jones. Mm-hmm. But you love Keanu Benton's ability to play against the run. Obviously didn't grade out as well as a run defender as he did as a pass rusher. But when we're starting to talk about these guys to back up Daquan Jones, if you can get any kind of added pass rush pop from that position, like that's just a bonus. So for me, he is a nice mix of both of those things. I think he can become a better run defender if he is really stationed in one position with the Bills. Obviously has to do a lot at Wisconsin. So yeah, he's a favorite really amongst most of Bills Mafia right now. And you'll see him mocked a lot to the Bills, which means we probably won't draft him. But hey, it is a nice thought. I do like him.
He's my favorite pick at 59. And then I heard Kyle Krabs of the Draft Dudes talk about how great it would be if the Miami Dolphins took him like middle of the second round, and I would just punch my hand through a wall if Keanu Benton was added to that Miami defensive line. Justin Walker comes in and says Keandre Coburn from Texas is his no matter what IDL. We also have Chuckles World coming in saying Gerard Clark out of Coastal Carolina is his dude late. Silas also likes guys like Dante Sills and Jalen Redmond. Chris Jenke, his honorable mention, because I think he said Maisie Smith was his dude, is Broderick Martin. My personal no matter what is Broderick Martin out of Western Kentucky. I fell in love watching the East-West Shrine game and following the East-West Shrine game. I got to get out to Vegas next year and catch the Shrine game in person and catch the practice in person. But every year I just find myself falling in love with a lot of these Shrine Bowl guys. I think ever since COVID, really, this extra year of eligibility, there's been such a more dearth of players, and a lot of guys have slipped from Senior Bowl to Shrine Bowl that maybe never would have gotten there. And Eric Galko has just done such a great job. And Broderick Martin, 6'5", 337, long arms, nimble feet. He's a pass rusher for his size, and that's what you really want to like about Broderick Martin. Lateral movement is impressive. He's got some quick hand work. He can create stalemates against double teams. He's solid at turning his hips into the second blocker, getting skinny, splitting those doubles when he takes on those doubles. And like I said, he just blew up Shrine Bowl week and just blew up the Shrine Bowl practices and the Shrine Bowl games. Again, not the Bills archetype. They like those guys between, 290 where Oliver is and 315. So whether Broderick Martin at 337 is going to be someone that the Buffalo Bills covet, I don't know, but I hope the Buffalo Bills make an exception for Broderick Martin, because I can just picture him going to the Philadelphia Eagles and sitting behind, Jordan Davis or going to one of these other teams that utilizes maybe a more traditional 34 where they have maybe more of those stand-up edge rushers and just eating up that space. Broderick Martin, one of my favorite in this class. A lot of people coming into the comment section. Mozzie Smith, of course, Mozzie Smith, Jacqueline Roy, Carl Brooks. So again, Nesta Jade Silvera. There's a lot of people call this a weak defensive tackle class, but I'm growing attached to a lot of these mid to late round DTs. I'm liking a lot of them, even though a lot of people say it is a weak class. All right, on to linebacker, the position that most people would say the Buffalo Bills have the biggest need at heading into the NFL draft. And there's a ton to choose from. Well, there's not a ton to choose from. This class sucks. But here is our the pick is in for our no matter what linebacker in this year's draft class. Ladies and gentlemen, Jack Campbell out of the University of Iowa. Say that we're just, looking for a safe double. I don't care. As Eric Turner says, he's just a really clean prospect. 6'5", 250 pounds with a 997 RAS. Just absolutely blew up the combine. Again, he's a Mike linebacker, so he's got modest range. He might be a little tight in his lower half. His man coverage skill set might not be the greatest in the world, but he's got size. He's physical. He's a really good processor. He's got really good intangibles. He's a guy you can put a green dot on. He's a leader. Whether you want to draft a guy at that position at 27, that's the big question. But if that's what you're looking for, Jack Campbell is that dude. He's one of the cleanest prospects in this class. What are your thoughts on Jack Campbell?
Yeah, one of the cleanest. Just real quick, my no matter what IDL was Cameron Young for Mississippi State.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Did I just jump right into mine?
It's okay. There's not much to say about him. He's a fatty, run stuffing one tech. Like, he is the archetype fit for the Bills at one tech. I just like him. He's not like highly ranked, but go look up Cameron Young if you don't know him.
Got lost in the sauce of Jack Campbell here. I apologize.
It is easy to get lost in the sauce of Jack Campbell because, as you mentioned, one of the cleanest prospects in this draft, and in a shallow linebacker class, That helps Jack Campbell a lot, I think, because I think that in other years, Jack Campbell's probably sitting there as a second rounder for a lot of people, and he may even be second round graded for most people this year as well. But given the shallowness and given the need, you could see the Bills potentially really liking Jack Campbell. Now, they haven't really had any visits with linebackers, which I find interesting.
No.
So they're
Smoke screen.
either smoke screening or they're just like really happy with who they have. But at the end of the day, like Jack Campbell seems to be a fit. It gets back to the philosophy of, do you think drafting Jack Campbell to replace Tremaine Edmonds puts you back to where you were at level pegging when you had Tremaine Edmonds? Probably not. So do you go in a different direction with this pick because no matter what you do there, you're not getting back to Tremaine Edmonds. So it becomes a balancing act here. I love Jack Campbell. He's definitely my favorite linebacker prospect in this class. As Chris said, he ticks so many boxes for the Bills and seemingly on paper would be an excellent fit for the Bills. So look, I think you'd be hard pressed to find a lot of people upset if Jack Campbell was the pick at 27, even though they might not feel it's the best value because they feel like, okay, trade back. You need a partner to trade back, right?
Yeah.
It's not as easy as just saying trade back. So if the Bills really like him and they don't want to miss out on him and they take him there, I won't lose any sleep over it.
And I don't know if you've heard this, Dave, but did you know that Jack Campbell has been working out with Luke Kuechly?
Oh, that's news to me.
I'm not going to forget you this time. Who is your personal, no matter what, at linebacker?
I kind of went off the reservation a little bit with this one because I was just so kind of tired of trying to find a Mike and they were just all meh to me. So I went with like this just sort of fit that probably, or this player that probably really isn't a fit for the Bills. But if you're trying to get creative, if you're Sean McDermott and you are maybe going to add some wrinkles to this defense, why not take a guy like Yasir Abdullah, who like some people list as an edge, a lot of places list him as a linebacker. I'm listing him as a linebacker. I like Yasir Abdullah. Sack production from the linebacker position. He did play linebacker at Louisville. Big improvement from 2021 to 2022, was in the top 40 linebackers grading wise for PFF last year. He is a pass rusher from the linebacker position. He's really good at kind of scraping downhill against the run as well. The knock on him is his size, right? Like if you look at his athletic ability, you look at his production, right? And you look at, what he tested athletically, you would say, why isn't this guy, why wouldn't this guy be getting drafted higher? And it's because of his size. He's not the biggest dude, so he's not necessarily going to be like a true great fit at linebacker for a 4-3 team, and he might be even a little small to play outside linebacker in a 3-4. So it becomes a matter of what position is he at the next level, and I think that's probably why he slides down a bit. But athletically, if you're trying to get creative with some pass rush, and I see Connor saying Terrell Bernard 2.0, but look, I think he's more athletically gifted than Terrell Bernard, and I think that he could be a dedicated pass rusher if you wanted to use someone like that creatively on this defense. Again, I don't think it's necessarily a fit, but I love the player.
Yeah, I went with one of your guys, another one of your guys, an NC State Wolfpack member, Isaiah Moore, 6'2", 235 pounds, a little slow on the 44.68, but a 3-time team captain, ultra aggressive linebacker, another guy who absolutely blew up Shrine Week. I mean, the Patriots coaches were trying very hard to keep their cool because they were just raving about the performance of Isaiah Moore. Now, there are some questions about his 3-down ability. A lot of people think that Isaiah Moore is more of like an early down thumper, but he's always around the ball. He's got good eyes. He's a technician, over 3,000 snaps. Again, another one of these older prospects that I seem to be drawn to this year. 23 tackles, 4 losses. And my guy, Ben Fennell, said he gives him Jermaine Pratt vibes. And Jermaine Pratt is a guy that we talked about on our free agency shows. And Jermaine Pratt is a guy who figured out how to drop back into coverage in the National Football League.
NC State guy,
playing with those Cincinnati Bengals. Yeah, another NC State guy. So I'm big on Isaiah Moore. And that leads us now to a position where we haven't really talked about much, if at all. We've been avoiding it like the plague, like barely doing our research. So maybe we're not the most, foremost experts on picking a guy here, but our pick is in for cornerback. And our no matter what cornerback in this year's draft class is Banks out of the University of Maryland, a guy who was a top 30 visit for the Buffalo Bills. I'll tell you what, if the Buffalo Bills are going to take a corner in the first round, they better not take a corner in the first round. But if they're going to take a corner in the first round, I love me some Deonte Banks, 6 foot, 197. There are some injury concerns in his past. He's a little inconsistent in his technique. Does he have that top end speed? I think maybe he answered that with his 4.35 at the combine. But where you're buying in with Deonte Banks, plus level size and length, just really good reactionary athleticism, and he's just a physical press man corner, kind of like Cam Smith, who's awesome too. And I'm gonna name out all these corners that you're
gives
that
me
you guys are seeing here in the comment section here, but
yeah, gives me some AJ Terrell vibes a little bit.
Yeah, like
that size speed combo, 4.35 40. I mean,
and if the Bills went with Deonte Banks and you then have Deonte Banks and you have Christian Benford and you have Kyer Elam, it makes you question what's going on with Trey White. Like, are they moving into safety? It also makes you question the direction of this defense because you have Benford, who's a bigger guy. You have Elam, who's a bigger guy. You have Banks, who's a man-to-man guy. It makes you question, like, are the Buffalo Bills switching the way in which this defense operates from a zone-heavy scheme to a scheme that utilizes a lot of man-to-man schematics and packages? So if the Buffalo Bills were to pull the trigger on Deonte Banks, who was a top 30 visit, that is sort of where your mind starts to go.
Yep.
But if you're also just like in general, a team who runs a lot of man-to-man defense, likes to be aggressive with your defensive backs, Deonte Banks is your dude.
I mean, can you imagine the meltdown Bills Twitter would go into if the Bills drafted a corner in the first round? I mean, like, after all these years of clamoring for one, we finally drafted one in Kyer Elam last year. If they went corner again this year, like a position, like, let's be real, like we probably talked about the least of any position other than maybe quarterback when it comes to the draft prep this year, because the Bills have such a cupboard full of guys since they brought back Dane Jackson. Benford's there, Elam's there. Obviously, Trey White, another year removed from the injury. It feels, at least on the surface, like it's a position of like you don't have to address it at all. So it'll be very interesting to see if they go that way. Bills Mafia STF mentions Corey Trice. I like that player there. It wasn't my no matter what, but I like Corey Trice a lot. So yeah, Banks would be a philosophy shift. I agree.
A bunch of different names coming in here. Silas Whittle, saying Starling Thomas. Chris Jenke says my no matter what cornerback is don't draft a quarterback, no matter what. Claude Puy, he agrees. He says Deonte Banks. Spin 0481 comes in, says Cam Smith. Love Cam Smith's game. Some Stephon Gilmore vibes. I don't know, South Carolina. Another physical, aggressive corner. And he says DJ Turner out of Michigan. That's a good one as well. Bills Mafia STF, you mentioned, said Corey Trice. Who is your personal no matter what at corner? I know that you're drawn to a guy the Buffalo Bills have shown some interest in.
Yeah, I mean, I don't I don't do a ton of mock drafts, but I did one last week and had two of my guys on it. I will say, I feel like I was fairly early to the Daryl Luter Jr. party than a lot of people.
You mentioned him on this show a week before it was known that the Buffalo Bills had met with him.
Correct. And so they've had a virtual meeting with him, South Alabama prospect. We know that the Bills are obviously not afraid to draft, FCS or smaller school guys. And they did Christian Benford last year. Scouting reports on him are that he's smooth, he's fluid, he's got really good ball skills. He was second team All-America by Pro Football Focus. He was honorable mention from Pro Football Network. He was ranked 24th on PFF's College 101 list last year. Look, he's just a really solid prospect that has a lot of tools you can work with, and with the right coaching, which the Bills have shown a propensity, especially at the corner position, to be able to coach up over the past several years. Guys like Dane Jackson, Levi Wallace, like Darrell Luter Jr., to me, it makes sense why they've had a virtual meeting with him. And he's really an interesting prospect to me. You look at where he is compared to some other guys, like Dane Brugler has him as his 22nd ranked overall corner. He's ranked inside the top 150 overall prospects on TDN. So he's gaining a little bit of traction, and I believe he would have.
Yeah, and the guy that I went with was Riley Moss out of the University of Iowa. This is a guy I've been on for 2 years now. I wanted him to declare last year, and he did not. 6 foot, 193 pounds, 4.45 40. He's got a 9.67 RAS. He's breaking barriers in this draft class, trying to be the first white cornerback since Jason Sehorn to play in the National Football League. He's not a scheme fit for everybody. If you're a heavy man-to-man defense, you don't probably want a guy like Riley Moss on your football team. He's best for sort of a zone-heavy teams, but this dude is a straight athlete. Using the zebra tracking at the Senior Bowl, he was the fastest player in play speed, period, in Mobile of any of the players that week. Explosive, really good play strength. He's a hard hitter. Ball hawk. He had 4 interceptions in zone coverage in 2021, which led the NCAA. And I'm going to get some flack for saying this because I've already gotten flack for saying this once. I'm not allowed to say this because he's breaking barriers and he deserves the chance to break barriers. But he could. I repeat, he could someday move to safety in his career. And Riley Moss really does. Again, same helmet. Gives me those Micah Hyde vibes. I think he's a guy who could be a really good center fielder in the National Football League. So I'm a really big fan of Riley Moss and his game, which leads us to...
A lot of Iowa guys talked about tonight.
Yeah, a lot of Big Ten guys talked about tonight too. Yeah. But the Big Ten this year is just all of my favorite prospects pretty much are Big Ten guys this year. But speaking of Big Ten guys, we're going to mention we're going to mention one more Big Ten guy, and that's our last no matter what here. No, we're not doing kickers, punters, and long snappers. Sorry about that. But our last no matter what of the evening, we'll start with our consensus air raid hour no matter what, and that is at the safety position. And this one's an ode to the big boss man here at Cover One, Eric Turner. This is his guy. The pick is in. Quan Martin, another one of these fast risers up the draft board from late, day 3 pick to a guy who I could easily see going at some point on day 2. 5'11", 194 pounds, big, physical, able to fit the run, play at the line of scrimmage. He had a really good boom in ball production in 2020, which, shows some growth in his game and some ball hawking ability. And he's just got the versatility to play everywhere. He can play nickel. He can play in the slot. He can play man-to-man defense, and he can even play in zone schemes. So he's versatile. He's a true split safety. He could be temporarily your backup nickel. If Teron Johnson gets hurt, you don't need to go and look to Saran Neal to fill that position. So Quan Martin, a guy the Buffalo Bills brought in for a visit, a guy that checks a lot of boxes, is a versatile secondary piece, and a guy who could be the future for the Buffalo Bills at the safety position should the Buffalo Bills decide to pull the trigger on him on draft day. Your thoughts on Quan Martin?
Big Quan Martin fan. Obviously, everyone here knows I'm a big Sidney Brown fan. What a duo that Illinois safety tandem was this past year. So you mentioned like all the things Eric has done and Anthony have done on the film work on Quan Martin. It seems to be a very good fit for the Bills, coming down into the box, can play deep, like that split safety look that they like to play. And like, it will be very interesting to see where a guy like Quan Martin gets drafted, because as you mentioned, it seems like he's quickly rising up boards, but this safety class being weak, you could see a guy like Quan Martin very easily going in day 2. I feel with the way things are headed right now. And I think that the safety position especially is going to be I feel like it's going to be more like a domino effect. I think when you see those first couple guys go, like Branch and Sidney Brown, like it could set off a domino effect for others to go, given how shallow the class is. So very fascinating to see what happens with the safety position in this draft. Quan Martin, notwithstanding, I think he's a day 2 guy for me.
All right, some names coming in here. Chuckles World says Jamie Robinson. Chris Jenke says Ronnie Hickman. Claude Puis says Jair Brown. Dave, who is and Bills Mafia STF says it might be cheating because he might be more of a linebacker, but a guy who visited the Bills, Marty Moppet,
the Bills,
Sacramento State. Dave, who is your personal no matter what at safety this year?
Yeah, this one's going to be interesting because I could see this guy going in the second round. I could see him falling into day 3, depending on what people like. And for me, it's Jordan Battle. I do like Ronnie Hickman, by the way, Chris. He was like one of the first prospects I actually dove into when it came to draft prep overall this entire season. So big fan of Ronnie Hickman. I think he's a little undersized, but I do like his game. So for me, it's Jordan Battle. Was a top 30 visit for the Bills, so you can kind of read into that what you want. Didn't test great athletically, but was the 12th overall rated safety per PFF in 2021, dropped to 50th in 2022, so a little inconsistency there. But you look at his snap counts, right, over the past several years. In 2021, in 2020, he played almost 400 snaps deep, 250 box, 400 deep in 2021, 300 box. He's kind of trended to playing more deep safety over the past 3 years, but he's got, 600 snaps under his belt over his career playing in the box. He's got almost 400 snaps playing in the slot. He's got over 1,000 snaps playing deep. So this is a guy who's really versatile, has graded out well, is willing to come up and make the tackle. He does miss tackles from time to time. There is a knock on him for that, but a fit for the Bills. Archetype, just over 200 pounds, 6 feet, to where he could come in and kind of find his way right into what position, where that safety spot is that they feel like he could fit best. So I do like Brandon Hill as well, Chris. But for me, Jordan Battle, I'm just kind of trying to connect the dots here. But again, where's he going to go? He could be round 2. He could be round 4. You just don't know with a guy like Jordan Battle.
Yeah, my no matter what, my personal no matter what was like my first crush of draft season. I think you remember me texting the group chat that we have with Kyle Knapp and with Casey Reed, and I was just, because Casey's a big FSU guy, I was like, dude, I can't keep my eyes off of Jamie Robinson, the safety from Florida State, and he was my dude from day one, and he continues to be my dude all the way up until draft day. Jamie Robinson out of Florida State University, 5'11", 194 pound, just an absolute firecracker. Like, he's versatile. He's played free safety, strong safety, nickelback. He's played linebacker at Florida State, and he was at the combine, and he was discussing at the combine sort of his versatility. And one of the things that stuck out to me was like, he was like, yeah, at Florida State, I was active in all 3 meeting rooms. He's like, I was attending meetings with the safeties. I would dip my head into the cornerback meeting room, and I would dip my head into the linebacker meeting room. I wanted to be in those rooms. I wanted to have a solid understanding of all of those positions. I wanted to be the best player I could. And to me, that just screams,
Bills will love that.
a guy who's going to have a good NFL career. He's one of the most physical DBs in this draft. I mean, he was just mauling people at the Senior Bowl. Now, some people really like that aggressiveness, and some people think that aggressiveness is going to get you penalized a ton in the National Football League. So he might need to tone it down a little bit, but this is a guy who can play at the line of scrimmage, or he can center field. He's a true split safety, which is something that the Buffalo Bills and a lot of NFL teams covet. 311 coverage snaps in 2022, only 1 touchdown allowed. So Jamie Robinson is my no matter what safety, personal no matter what safety in this class. And that leads us to our conclusion here this evening, David. We got one last segment, and that is we've talked about so many prospects tonight. We've talked about consensus prospects, guys that we both love. We're both pounding the table for. Guys that you're pounding the table for, guys that I'm pounding the table for. If you had to pick just one player this evening from your personal list or from our Air Raid Hour list, if you had to pick just one, you had to pick your Vontae Mack. Your Vontae Mack of this draft class. The one guy you want the Buffalo Bills to walk out of this draft with. Who is your Vontae Mack?
I've wrestled with this one really throughout the show and before the show, but it all leads back to one guy for me, and it's a guy that realistically the Bills probably can't get, but it's not impossible, and that's Jackson Smith-Njigba. That's the guy for me. I feel like if he's within striking distance, he's the guy I'd want the Bills to come away with this draft, just from a fit and what he can contribute day one. I feel like he could be an atypical alpha, as you mentioned, an atypical wide receiver one, but from day one, he could come in and be the alpha slot to pair with Diggs and Davis this year. You still allow Shakir to develop. You still have Dawson Knox adding weaponry for Josh. I think, to me, is the route I would go from a team building standpoint this year. I know there's the glaring hole at linebacker, but I feel like the Bills have to try to mix it up a little bit this year. And I think, in the vein of giving Josh another weapon like that for not just the short term, but for the long term as well, that's where my kind of heart leads. Now, when I make my formal prediction for who the Bills are going to pick, it's not going to be Jackson Smith-Njigba, but he would be who I would want.
Yeah. Claude Puig comes in and says Zay Flowers, no matter what.
He was on the short list, Claude. Zay Flowers was on the short list for me for this.
Silas Whittle says Jack Campbell. Chris Jenke says Zach Campbell. Justin Walker, gotta respect the consistency. Comes in and says Ivan Pace Jr. out of Cincinnati. So a couple of guys here. I struggled because I wanted this to be. I like JSN. And for all your solid foundational reasoning, I wanted it to be a bigger guy. Like, I wanted it to be a lineman, because that's like my philosophy in this draft is I really think the Buffalo Bills need to get tougher on both lines.
I agree with you.
I really wanted to make it Keanu Benton. I really did. I really did. But at the end of the day, you got to protect your franchise quarterback. So my Vontae Mack of this year's draft is Darnell Wright out of the University of Tennessee. I just think he comes in right away and he can be a plug and play right tackle who's going to protect your franchise quarterback. I think that he has the ability to kick over to the left side and become your franchise left tackle over time. He's a guy I'm willing to trade up for. I don't think the Buffalo Bills would be maybe willing in this draft to trade up for, but to me, it all comes back to Darnell Wright and protecting Josh Allen. There's multiple ways to go about doing that. More 12 personnel, getting a safety blanket, a guy you can dump the ball off to in JSN. There's a ton of different ways you can protect Josh Allen. For me, I literally want to protect him. Get me Darnell Wright. That's the guy who, if we walk out of this draft with Darnell Wright, I don't care what the other five picks
I would be thrilled. I would be thrilled with that as well. Like, are you kidding me? I'd be so happy with that.
Because, you do that, and then, like, you add one of these receivers that we're talking about, at some point on day 2 or even early day 3, and your offense, I think, is just set and ready to go and ready to be one of the tops in the league, especially if Ken Dorsey really reflects this offseason. He implements some more 12 personnel. He gets back to some of those Brian Daboll staples. I think the Buffalo Bills offense could be elite next year, and Darnell Wright would just be like that icing on the cake, or that sort of like, final piece to the puzzle. All right, Dave, we finally made it to the end. There was somebody in here who said you missed 3 positions: kicker, punter, and long snapper. So I'll tell you my no matter what at kicker, punter, and long snapper: Tyler Bass, Sam Martin, and Reed Ferguson. Those are my no matter whats at kicker.
Fresh off the extension, Tyler Bass.
Fresh off the extension. I don't even think we talked about that. That might be the first time we have never talked about an extension on this show. But Tyler Bass even said it in his extension press conference, like, yo, it's really nice to have just the same guys for 2 years in a row. Super nice. Before we head out, any thoughts on Aaron Rodgers to the Jets?
I texted my wife. She's a big Packers fan. I was like, Rodgers traded to the Jets. She's like, so long, sucker, about Aaron Rodgers. She's ready. She's ready for the Jordan Love era in Green Bay. Now, grass isn't always greener. I'm telling her, like, look, it's probably maybe going to be a rough season for the Packers, but she just can't stand Aaron Rodgers, the guy. I saw Pat Moran's post that he put up earlier, and I agree with some of it. It'd be really kind of nice to see like him getting eaten alive by the New York media if things don't go well. But the reality is this, right? The Jets have some pretty good talent on the offensive side of the ball, skill position wise. There's no way you can look at this objectively and say the Jets aren't a better team. You can't say the Jets aren't a better team without Aaron Rodgers. They're a better team with him. Yeah. Whatever he has left in the tank remains to be seen, but they are a better team with him. And I think that, it's noteworthy. We'll see what he's got left. And it doesn't mean the Bills still aren't the favorites to win the division, but I mean, the Jets got a quarterback. I do like that the Jets seemingly got a little bit fleeced in the deal, but if they're a good team this year and maybe next, like they might think it's worth it. So we will see.
Go out there, play 66% of the snaps, and then just call it a career. Call it a career.
Yes. The ultimate troll job.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we will be back on Thursday. What time does that draft start on Thursday? 8 p.m.
8
p.m. 8 p.m. Eastern time. It'll be the two of us. I know Pro Anth will be joining us. I think we got Thomas Delorier and a couple of other fine folks from Cover One. We'll be doing the roundtable. We'll be there from start to finish on Thursday night, and then Pro Anth, Sky's coverage, and us as well will be part of that panel. We'll be back on Friday night as well, and then the Going Deep guys, Kevin Masseri and Mike Bunt, are going to have you covered on Saturday. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's here. We are finally made it. Ignore the smoke. It's time to just sit back, relax, and enjoy the NFL draft. So, until next time, ladies and gentlemen, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Thank you for watching tonight's episode of the Air Raid Hour. Make sure to hit that like button on the way out. If you are catching the show on demand, leave a reply in the comments section and we will respond over the course of the week. You can always listen to every episode next day on all major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, by searching Air Raid Buffalo. Thank you for your continued support, and as always, go Bills!